Well, hello everybody, and welcome to June's monthly roundtable discussion. My name is Debbie. I am really glad to be back. It's been a while since I've facilitated a conversation, and since then, we've had Francis Obaika, who has joined our team from Germany. I'm really excited to have a chat with him about this month's topic. Um, as you can see, there's Belinda, there's Francis, and there's me, and we're kind of the usual host of the roundtable discussion, which is a special thing to have us actually be the guest on this month's discussion. But I think that that's a really great sort of shake up to have as we round up the first part of the year. Actually, it's already June. Time flies. So I would love to welcome Francis from Germany. Francis, that you've already been listening to because he's hosted a few or couple of roundtable discussions. And I would also love to welcome Belinda, who is not a stranger, I think, to most of us on the platform. This month's topic has been dynamic communication, which is an absolutely relevant topic to all of us. Whether you consider yourself a communicator or not, doesn't matter. We all communicate. But most importantly, communication is something we can learn and grow in and be more effective in. And so really loved the content on the platform this month. We've had a variety of articles, of videos, people covering different aspects of communication. And we'll just sort of talk about what stood out to us and add some of our nuggets of wisdom as well. And I would love to kick off with Francis. Would you share some of the things that stood out to you and what you found interesting?
Thank you very much, Debbie. I love what you said. You said that communication is something, whether we like it or not, we communicate. I love what Marie said. She said, communication is serving. And one of the things about communication is the aspect that she looked at it, that yes, sometimes within our communication, there is limitation, but that limitation should not stop us from not being able to communicate. And I love that fact that she said, in the midst of that communication, we look at what do the people need? It's not what am I trying to give to people, but what are the needs of the people? What are their pain? What are they proud of? What are some of the pain points that they're going through? And within that, we're able to effectively communicate. Now, I think one of the nuggets for me is not just going and just communicating immediately, but rather thinking through, what do I really want to communicate? Who am I communicating to? Who is my audience? And it requires a little bit of research. It requires a little bit of understanding the audience, but not allowing the audience to understand me. And also, I think that was something that really spoke to me. And I think one of the things I really like is the aspect of, is my communication, if I'm preaching or teaching, is my audience, my message, what I'm saying, is it reaching the people? Do they understand it? Is it complex or is it simple? So it's something that was really helpful when just reading and listening to what the aspect of what Merit was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally am with you. That also resonated with me. Belinda, there was something that we were discussing earlier that you were mentioning about audiences and all of that. Could you share a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the people that contributed to this month with the articles or LDXs or the lounge talked about some aspect of knowing your audience or figuring out who you're talking to, and making it relevant to them. Because in order to effectively communicate, we need to know who the audience is. And it doesn't mean that we change the complete message. I like the way that Marie said, like, the gospel that Paul preached was like a sweet with different packaging on, depending on whether he was talking to the Romans or the Jews or just the Gentiles. And that's the same with our communication. We need to realize it has to have the same core but then it can be packaged in a slightly different way depending on the audience. So I think that was one key that's really came out really strongly for me this month.
Yeah. And I'd like to sort of stay with that audience bit a little bit longer because it's absolutely essential. I teach on marketing and I teach on research a lot, and we talk about how target audiences are important. And I think some people struggle to understand why. Like, is that a biblical concept? Is that sort of a trendy cultural thing? And I think that it's important for us to understand how deeply biblically, like that's a biblical truth, because that's how God communicates with us. When God set out to save the world or Israelite, he didn't say all the nation. He picked one person to start off with. And I think that that's a principle we can always go back to say, how does God engage with us? And how effective is that when we go back to scripture, we can always see that this is sort of a pattern that God does. He always starts with one person. He understands the person, whether it's Moses or Abraham, whoever it is, he always goes, okay, I'm going to start off with you and then multiply as time goes on. And I think that that's really, really important. Belinda, you talked a little bit about sharing the gospel when we're talking about social media, and I would love if you talked a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Marita said in her article, where she shared some do's and don'ts on social media, but she shared one little aspect that it was a little nugget, just that we so often think of social media as a way to be sharing about our schools or, our different things that are happening. But actually, it is a place where we can reach out to people, where we can share the gospel with people. It's a community, like a community that you live in. And so just to kind of remember that social media is an area where we can be actually just impacting, for the gospel, for the kingdom. And I do that on my social media in a way, but it was just such a good reminder that even, on YWAM social media, that can be an aspect that we mustn't forget to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that thought. Francis, you talked a little bit about also social media and sort of how we behave on social media from one of the talks. Could you speak into that?
Yes, I think one of the things with social media, I think it's also important to recognize that, we need to know why are we coming on this platform? What are the content we're trying to put out there? And I think sometimes as Christians, as YWAMers, we underestimate these platforms because we're not used to it. For example, TikTok, Instagram. We're very used to Facebook. We're very used to YouTube and the rest of them. But it's really using these mediums to be able to reach out to people. I love what Belinda said. She said, reaching out, ministering the gospel to people. In this day and age, most people are not on the streets. They're on their phones. Yeah. They are on their phones. They are also at the same time they're online. But we're used to. It's not saying ignore that aspect. No, we still keep that aspect going on. But what we use these as an opportunity that God has given to us as YWAMers, that we're even on these platforms. But we're not just there to preach a message. It brings us back to what Marita is saying. She's like, we need to know the content we're putting out there. What are the contents we're putting out? What are some of the things? Are we just trying to promote our base, or are we promoting the kingdom? Are we advertising the base, or are we authentic in what we're saying? And sometimes it's not like Instagram where we make everything look clean, but we're real. We're real. We're real about what's happening in the base. We're real about some of the things that we're going through. But at the same time, we're not just negative, also positive. You bring in a message of hope. At the same time, it's what are we showing? What are we showing people? And at the end of the day, I think what's more important is that keyword, communication. In communication, there also needs to be an aspect of listening. So it's not just giving out there, but also being willing to receive feedback. And as we listen, we also respond. But if we're just communicating but not willing to listen, we'll lose people in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's such a vital point because I think Marie rightfully pointed out that the world is baying for our attention, right? Like the most expensive or most valuable commodity in the world today isn't money. It's really the human attention, and there's no lack of it, and it's ever growing, ever evolving. And I think that calls for us to be intentional in how we engage on this social media platforms. And as you were talking, Francis, it also reminds me of what Joseph talked about, because he talked a little bit about listening. It's absolutely vital to listen to who engages with us on social media, because then I think it allows us to do what you were talking about, Belinda, which is to say, what do people need because we're listening, and then from that or out of that we can share pieces of or parts of the God story with our audience in a way that is authentic and not clean cut. Like Francis was saying, it doesn't have to be all clean cut and shiny and all put together, but saying, how do we, in a very genuine way, connect and serve people even on social media? So what else was interesting to us? I actually thought part of Miranda's article was really important because she started off with, "I'm not a professional." And I thought that was such a human, very humble, open statement to make, that this sort of thought of, oh, I'm not a communicator, or I'm not a professional. And really, she really invited people, I think, to consider what small steps we could make and take in order to communicate effectively without it being this sort of big mountain that we have to climb. But what else stood out to you guys from the content?
Well, I think talking about Miranda's article, she used the phrase "don't fudge it." So fudge being like the sweet, but in English we use that when we talk about saying things that are we're not, it's not really true when we're fudging things. And that just really, it did just resonate with me in terms of, like, we've got 18 values in YWAM, and the 18th value is communicate with integrity. And I think the guys on the social media LDX as well also mentioned that, Jonathan and Nathan, just to remember that as YWAM, we need to make sure that what we're communicating is actually true. So don't overblow things when, like, say, oh, there's 15,000 people that came to this thing when it was only 10. Or I'm thinking about the Send this weekend. People, there were so many numbers going around, but actually there was 9,400 is what I heard, which is an amazing number. We don't need to fudge it. We don't need to make it bigger. And so, but just to be careful of getting caught in that trap of just like adding a little bit or making it sound a bit better. And so just to be writing plainly and honestly. I also loved the fact that she talked about telling stories. And I think that is a key in any communication. She was talking specifically about written communication and more like newsletters. But in any communication, I that's what I find when I am teaching, when I am preaching, when I am doing anything, telling a story gets the point across so much better. And we have our the greatest communicator, Jesus. What did he do? He told stories, told parables. So we can learn from that as well. That telling stories is a way that people can connect with the content. And make sure that they're getting the point, rather than just going, okay, well, that's fun, that's great, but what the story actually gets it across.
Yeah, that is so good. I want to sort of go back to the first point you made, because I think that is absolutely important, but also tricky sometimes to do, right? Because you're on social media platform, you want to make sure that what you're writing is captivating, that your images are great looking, which I'm all for. I actually love excellent sort of visual communication. But I think you're absolutely right that we need to remember that value of communicating with integrity, that we're truth tellers, that when we tell stories, that we are convinced that it's from a pure heart and it is telling the truth. We're not changing or adapting. And I think sometimes with algorithms and how this social media platforms work, it's very easy to maybe subtly slip into that, a little bit of a lie here or a little bit of a non-truth here. Maybe you're not even thinking about it. And that's why we need to slow down and remember why we're on there and why truth is important, because that partly communicates who God is to our audience. So thanks for bringing that up.
That's so true.
Francis.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that it's just like what integrity, that word integrity. I'm thinking about Jesus, for example. He meets Peter and Andrew fishing and he says to them, follow me. But he doesn't stop there. He calls, but the calling is a communication. And then he tells them, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He knew where he was going to take them to. He also called them with a promise, fishers of men, and he made them fishers of men. And I think that's one of the things with communication, that before we get on these platforms, our content is with us before it's published. But it's going back to the content and saying, is this content that I'm putting out there, is it true? Is this content I'm putting out there, is it about me, or is it about me reaching people? Is my audience, am I considering my audience as I'm communicating? And at the same time, I think one of the aspects in why when we have this limitation, and based on our limitation, we don't, we create, I call it excuses in limitation. So because we're limited, we make excuses. But I think we should kind of put that aside, because in Jesus's day and age, he was limited in everything. But he did not allow that limitation stop him from becoming who he is. At the same time, he was relevant to everyone, but they were not, the people were not on the same page. He was able to reach people where they are at. So I think in our communication, we should be able to reach people where they are at. For example, I love what the guys who talked about the various platforms, TikTok, they talked about Facebook, they talked about Instagram and YouTube, and we have what the Nathan and Jonathan talked about, that on social media we need to see the various age groups of this platform. TikTok is between 13 and 20. And he talked about Facebook is about 35 plus. He said Instagram is the whole aspect of 18 to 35. And then YouTube, I mean, he said YouTube is coming back again. YouTube, he said, is a place where you can archive your things. And I'm thinking that this is something that we need to really take advantage of and really use them. But as we use these tools, that we're very integral in the way we use it. We speak truth. I mean, truth is truth. And as before we allow the materials go out, we look at the materials and say, am I willing to, is this real? Is this true? Is it authentic? Am I honest about it? The stories I'm telling. When people come to me a couple of years later and say, I heard about this story, we're like, there was little salt in it. No, but it's saying that I'm using it, and what I'm speaking using these mediums is a form of truth to communicate, because I think that's what makes us different, actually, that we speak in truth. The scripture says the truth shall set people free. It's not following the rhythm of the world. We use the platforms, but we're bringing a message of life to them.
That just reminded me of something, Francis. So when we used to do a teaching, and it's kind of similar to what Marit said about the gospel in different packages. But in communication, it's called 3D communication. So just to be aware that you're going to be watched from 3 different, like in 3D, whatever you communicate today needs to be with integrity, because who knows, there's all these like tweets that come back or things that happen down the road. And if you've got an audience, for instance, that, you're communicating your newsletter with your supporters, you're going to be talking a little bit different than if you're communicating with people that you're sharing the gospel with. And yet there's the same story in that. And we need to be careful of communicating in a way that if one of those audiences reads the others, that it can cause problems. So to make sure that our communication, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody sees everything, but just to be aware that sometimes communication gets out there, and just to have that integrity, to be telling the same things, maybe in slightly different ways, for slightly different audiences, but to have that core being the same is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really, for me, it makes me pause a little bit, even as a communicator, and really go, this is serious stuff. Like, we impact our lives, the lives of our audiences as we communicate, and also an encouragement that we can do this better. I think that's what the resources on the platform show us this month. That, because for me, when I teach about communication, I always say, or talk about it, I always say it's not about perfection. It's not about not ever making any mistake or saying the wrong thing ever. It's about being humble and working hard at what you put out there. And so I love the thought on intentionality that Joseph also talked about when on his conversation. He talked about how it's really important to be intentional, because even if, for example, I put out a tweet today and I do it based on what I know, and 5 years later, I realized that what I said in 2022 was off, I can own that and make it right as time goes on. And I view communication really as this living thing, this living experience where we grow and we experience different things, and there is room for mistakes, but not sort of what I call stupid mistakes. But yeah, so really great thoughts. Thanks, guys. I think the things that have stood out is the communication is serving. We need to be listening to our audiences. We need to be consistent in how we communicate, even if we communicate to different audiences. And we need to be intentional. I would love to sort of wrap up our talk with some of the thoughts that Joseph also shared, which was about true communication brings hope to people. It brings joy to people's lives. And it's something that we can always learn. And so I hope that listeners are encouraged by that. There's a lot more that we haven't managed to cover in this roundtable, but we encourage you to go on the ELLC website and check out all of those resources. Also, remembering now, I'll remember to say that you should share it with your friends, with your family, with whomever you think would benefit from this resources, because there are a lot of nuggets of wisdom and of truth that can help you grow. And I think we're going to wrap it there for the month of June, but really for the first part of the year. And we will come back again and continue in September of 2022. Thank you so much, Francis. Thank you, Belinda, for being part of this conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to you guys and learning from you.
Yeah, the feeling is mutual. Thanks, Debbie.
It's a pleasure.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.